Hey YouTube, it's Jordan. Just wanted to stop and take a break from TV stuff for a little bit and talk about older Sansui speakers. And the subject in question today are these sp-3500s that we use in the store for kind of background music, and decided to crank them up this morning and buzz and rattle and not a lot of bass. Now, popping the grill, I noticed the first thing that, number one, the surround had come loose from the woofer, and it had come loose from a good portion of the woofer. And the other one here, which I'll show you in a moment, had completely torn free, except for a small portion. And secondly, this doesn't move very much. We get down on the plane, I'm pressing pretty hard. That's very little movement. And the surround has literally turned to granite. Now, if you zoom in here, you see that this is a pleated cloth surround treated with some form of dope to seal off the cabinet and maintain the air seal. This has gone to granite. So as a woofer, it's not very woofy. So what I've done is I took a 15-inch foam surround and I had to cut it down. And in fact, if you're curious, that's about how much I had to cut out of it in order to get it to work. And you see that there's a little seam there that's been sealed with rubber cement. But this really brought it back to life. And now, as you can see, if I flex it here, we've got quite a bit of motion. It's about a ½ an inch in one direction and about another ½ an inch in another direction. So we've got like an inch of excursion now, and it's very easy to move. So in theory, I'll have a great deal more bass response out of these than I ever have before. And removing the old surround, this is like a rock. Like I can bend and move this, and it's just hard as a rock. So if you've got some old Sansui speakers and you're wondering why they don't have a lot of bass, check the free movement of these woofers. These woofers are supposed to move. The one here that I haven't done yet doesn't move worth a crap. It's pretty solid. But that's not all. There's another type that doesn't use the inverted roll. They use pleated paper. I have some 15-inch Sansui speakers. I forget what model they're out of, SP, like 5000 or something. I'll show you those in a second. Those are deteriorating too, so we gotta find a solution for those. Alright, so here are the other Sansui speakers. I forget what these are out of per se, but they are the looks like W3000. Yeah, W3000, 5 ohm, big giant magnet, big voice coil. But whatever they treated this pleated paper with has gone brittle. And so now it just cracks and crumbles. And same thing here. This is solid as a rock. It doesn't want to move at all. So we have to do something about these. I imagine that many of these Sansui speakers are going to be going this wayside, which is really going to affect their efficiency and performance. So let's go back to the ones from the sp-3500, and I'll show you what's involved in making it work. Okay, so back to these. So if you're curious, these are the W114 Woofers, 5.5 ohms. That's a weird impedance. But big magnet, big voice coil. That's about a 3-inch voice coil in there. It's pretty hefty. Surprisingly, with all of that, they say that they're only good for 40 watts. Maybe that's honest continuous beating. Who knows? These are efficient enough that you really can't crank them up that loud. So obviously this one's done, so this one isn't a good example. So let's put this one aside. And then we'll work on the next one over here, which needs to get torn down. So obviously the first thing that I want to do is I want to continue separating this surround from the cone here. And the glue's pretty much done, so it's literally just coming up pretty effortlessly. So I'm just going to go around the edge here and very carefully peel this up. Yeah, that's already broken free. Let's come back around here. just coming right up. No effort at all. If I wasn't worried about tearing the cone, I could literally just run my finger around the edge and it would separate. So as soon as I separate the surround, you can see immediately the woofer has lots of travel. So that is most certainly the cause of our loss of performance. So now the problem is getting these trim pieces up. Now you can or cannot leave these on. It really doesn't matter. It's more of an aesthetic thing. These aren't mounted behind the baffle, so you don't have to worry about these being a gasket. You can take them off, you can leave them on. I'm going to leave them on. And so what we're going to do is get a tool, namely here this screwdriver. And what we want to do is we want to get under the edge here. This has the weakest point. This is the point where there's the least amount of surface area contacting it. Peel it up, kind of work it underneath here. And then once we get it loose, we can grab onto it and just kind of work the screwdriver around and pry all these up. So let me just kind of get the screwdriver underneath here. This is going to take a little bit of time if you want it not to get screwed up. And just pry it up. That way you don't tear it and damage it and all that sort of thing. Work it around. It's good that I don't care about the existing surround. But you get the idea. We're going to peel this up. In fact, if you have one of these cold chisels like this, because of the slant edge, that works really well too, and you can really get these up pretty quickly without worrying about destroying them or splitting them apart. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to get this whole trim ring off, and then we can focus on getting this surround apart. Alright, so we've peeled up the cardboard trim pieces over here. We did get some separation a little bit, but not a big deal. So now, really what we want to do is just focus on getting this old surround off. So get your fingers up and underneath there, and if you're lucky and the glue's weak like this one, you can just kind of pull up on it and it will separate just like that. And then of course the remainder of bits that you have left over, go ahead and take that chisel, go around the edge, and we're just going to clean off the remainder here so we have a good glueable surface to work with. In fact, if you have a brush, it wouldn't hurt to brush all this out. Let's just do that. So with our handy brush, we're just going to clean all the dust off of the cone here and the dust cap and on the basket. If we have any particulates left over that might become a hindrance to adhering the new surround down, we got to get rid of those too. So now it's prepped. Now here comes the disappointment, finding the surround that works. Unfortunately, Sansui in their infinite wisdom decided to have a woofer that was weird sized. It's a 14-inch basket, but it's not like the JBL 14 inches, it's a Sansui 14 inch. So using an LE14 is not going to work for you. Believe me, already been down that route, doesn't really fit. There are other solutions that kind of sort of work. But really in this instance, unless you want to have somebody custom make surrounds for you like MWA speaker products, which requires you have a minimum quantity order and a resale license, you really have to go the route of the layman, which is taking a 15-inch surround and cutting it down. So what I'm doing here is just using some leftover 15-inch Sherwin Vega foams that I have, and as you can see, lying them down in here, there's quite a difference. And as you saw previously, I cut away about 4 inches. There's the piece there. If you want that for reference, that's about how much I had to remove to make it work. So what we're going to do is get a pair of nice sharp scissors, and we're going to make an incision, a nice straight cut right down here, and just separate those two. And then what we're going to do, we're going to take this around and we're going to manipulate it and try to fit it in to the cavity and attach it to the cone. Now, it's okay that it's not going to fit perfectly yet. We're not there yet. What we're trying to do by fitting it like this is assess how much we're going to have to cut off. I already know that, but I'm showing it to you as a method so that you guys can figure that out. And what you want to do is try to get it as trued up as possible so you know what you're getting yourself into. Move the cone around, make sure it's kind of centered, because all of this is going to affect where you cut it. This shit's important. Don't neglect these steps, or you'll be very disappointed when you have to do it all over again, and when you find out you've destroyed the cone when you rip up the much stronger glue that's holding your new surround down. So, as we see here, there is the point of overlap right there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to cut a little bit inside that, just in case we make a mistake. And that way we'll have a little bit of leeway in the event that something goes wrong. And knowing my luck, something does go wrong, because that's just how life is. Alright, so we'll cut that away. We're going to remove our trim piece. And then we're going to stuff this all down in here and double check our fitment. And we see here that there's just a little, still tiny bit of overlap, even though I've tucked all of this down. Let's double check again and again and again. And we see that there's still just a little tiny bit of overlap. Just a little bit. Just a little bit. 1/4 of an inch at most. So let's do somewhere between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. Cut that off. And then squeeze it all back down. And we see now, the goal here is to pull it all together so that we don't have a visible gap. And so far we're looking pretty good. Stretch that just a pinch, and there we go. So that's going to meet up. We're going to trim these, fine trim these, and make sure that they all meet together and perfect. So let me put the camera down while I do that, and then we'll look at the ready to glue down surround. Alright, so this is about as close as we're getting, and what we'll do when we finalize everything is we'll put a tiny little bead of rubber cement in there to seal it, but also allow it to be flexible. So again, you want to keep going around this thing and making sure that it's set right, because the next step that we're going to do is actually apply the adhesive. And we can see that there's a point here that this kind of wants to come up a little bit. So we're going to play with it a little bit, press it down and make it settle. And then we're going to apply a bead of glue around the inside of that lip and tamp it down and make it work. And again, my favorite is the BSC adhesive from Springfield Speaker Repair. They call it their black professional grade adhesive. It becomes very tacky very quickly. It's dry strong, but also very flexible. So what I'm going to do now is take the glue, and we're going to clean off any debris that's on the nozzle here. Just a moment. Okay, and then we're going to go around the inside lip here. And we're going to lay down a small bead. It doesn't have to be big. Along the area where the old surround sat. Take your time. Don't use an excessive amount. You can use the old gluing area as your guide. Okay. So we got that all set in there. We're going to go ahead and press this down. And while you're doing that, you should constantly move and reposition the cone so that things are centered in the voice coil gap as this is drying. Because God forbid you take off that pretty looking dust cap and have to insert shims. Just pay attention. We're just going to keep going around the edge here and pulling and recentering. And in fact, I'm going to put this down momentarily while I keep doing that and make sure that everything's centered. And then we'll glue the outer edge. Alright, so fast forward about 5 minutes. This has been 5 minutes of continuous pressing down, tamping, recentering, and we can see now that the lip has adhered to the cone quite well. Also, our gap has closed, because you'll find that when you coat this stuff with the glue that it makes it soft and spread a little bit more. So that's good. Now, so the last part that we're going to do, or second to last part really, of this, attaching this, is we're going to center the cone and get it in its axis so that there's no rub or anything like that. And we're going to apply a bead of glue around the edge and do the same process. Just constantly keep recentering and tamping down so that by the time it's dry, it's affixed in the center cavity of the magnet. And you got to get your sweet spot, because you'll tilt it one way, tilt it the other way, tilt it forward, back, etc. You don't want any rub. Rub is bad. Rub will destroy your voice coil, so make sure it's centered while it's drying and everything will be happy. So again, what we're going to do is we're going to take our fancy glue and we're going to go around the edge here where it used to be adhered. We're just going to go around the edge. And then we're just going to center everything. Feel for that sweet spot right in the middle. And then we're going to start tamping it down. When you tamp it down the first time, you want to recheck your centering. Make sure the centering's not wrong. Also, if you want to play with your little gap thing here, you can. Tamp this down. Check for rub. No rub, we're still pretty on center, that's good. Yes, indeedy. This is the most monotonous thing you'll do, is having to sit here and babysit this thing while the glue gets tacky and dries. And when you feel it's starting to get tacky like this is here, double check your gap and make sure your gap's together. And push on it, make sure you don't have any rub. We've got a nice travel there. This glue is strong enough that you can do that, and it's tacky quick enough that you can do that. I'm going around the cone again and making sure that it's lying flat. Going around the basket again, making sure it's lying flat. It's starting to get tacky, so in about a minute or two we can actually apply our sealant to the gap where the foam comes together. Now I know all the purists are going to scream because it's not a cloth surround and it's got a little slit in it, but you know what, I really don't care, because these are going to be behind those beautiful wood lattice grills, and I'm not going to look at the woofers. I'm going to be looking at the speakers, and I'm probably going to be listening to them more than looking at them. But if you are concerned with this, you might want to find somebody that can make you a custom surround. Again, MWA is really awesome for making custom speaker parts, but they want you to have minimum quantity orders and also be have a resale license. So I work for a shop that has a deal going with them, and we purchase them in pretty large quantities. So, but we don't have any Sansui stuff because, quite frankly, this is the first time I've run into this in any sort of real concern. Alright, so this is really not coming up anymore. It's nice and tacky. And I can push on this and get nice travel. No rub. It's precisely what I want. So now we just got to take care of this little bugger right here. And really what we do is we flip this guy over, which is going to be very difficult with one hand because it's heavy. And we see on the back side here that there's our little gap that we created. If the camera will focus. There we go. And so what we have to do is we have to make sure that glue the nice flexible glue we use gets into that little crevice there. So let me grab a Q-tip and I'll show you what I do. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have this Q-tip and I have our glue. I'm going to put a little dab here right in the middle. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take the Q-tip and we're going to push it into the crack. And I'm going to do this in a rolling motion. And we're going to spread it over the crack and push it in there, and then thin it out over the side so that it does not become an impediment for the surround in any way, shape, or form. So by doing this, we're using the flexibility of the rubberized glue as not only a sealant, but allows it to unify and become one continuous moving surround rather than a place where the gap causes them to move independently. Man, this thing's heavy. Alright, so we now see that the gap there's no light shining through, whereas previously we could see the table. I may put a tiny little dab of it up top, just because I'd rather have it be sealed than not. We'll put a little dab there, and again, press it in with the Q-tip. And I don't really care too much about the seam. Functionality is more important to me. So, this is going to dry, and when it's done drying, I'm going to go ahead and re-glue those trim pieces. In fact, I can probably just do that right now. It's easy. You just take a bead of glue and go around the inner edge here. I'm not going to put a lot on there. Just enough to make it stick. And we're going to kind of center it over the screw holes here. I assume there's some form of symmetry. And then I have these little clampy things that I can use to hold it there while it dries. So we'll just do that with the rest of these guys. Three more. I won't bore you with that. And then when they're dry, we can actually put them back in the cabinets. Won't that be fun? Okay, so while we're waiting for the other one to dry, let's take a sad measurement on these Sansuis. These actually measure 15 inches. So you would think that the standard 15 would work. It actually kind of almost does. Let's see. Standard 15. The standard 15s could work for these larger Sansuis. What actually seems to work a little bit better are the surrounds that are used for the 2215. I think that's what they are, 2215 JBLs. Yeah, that could totally work. We'd have to cut the rest of this out and invert them. But I don't have enough surrounds to do that. I've only got one. Let's see what this. Actually, no. I take that back. That's the 2235 JBL. That's what will work on these large 15 inchers. So if I get another 2235 surround, maybe I'll do a video on these. I'm not really sure yet. But yeah, the other one's about done, so let's go check on it. Alright, so it's been about a half an hour, and all of my trim pieces are set. The woofer's set up. I got this nice long excursion now. I stuffed the other one in the cabinet over there just because I needed something to do. So we're going to pop this mother back in, and then I'll see how it sounds. Now, just as a word of warning, I'm not going to be able to play music because of the Content ID Nazis that are shutting everybody's YouTube down due to some sort of background music. So, rather than bore everybody to death with consistent tones, I'm just going to take a listen to them and give you my thoughts. So, yeah, it's not as exciting, but that's really going to be how it is. So, let me get this one back in and we'll have a listen to it.
I got rats in my bedroom. But maybe if I told you
Alright, let's see if they can grab a hold of those songs and pop me for that. About 3 seconds each. Anyway, much better bass response. Much greater increase in efficiency. Definitely worth the effort. You can see the little bitty seam there. But otherwise, they work great. Better than I've ever heard them sound. Even though acoustically this probably isn't the best room for it. And I'm just using a little bitty 15 watt per channel EL84 amp. They're efficient enough for it. It gets stupid loud. And it's clean, it's clear, plenty of bass. So yeah, if you've got some older Sansuis and you're wondering why they don't sound all that great, you know, take your hand and see how freely these move. These should move a lot. Big long throw. About 1 inch of extension out of that. So yeah, that's the short way of taking care of that, cutting down a surround. If I ever get some more JBL surrounds, the 2235s, maybe I'll do those 15 inches. Of course, at the moment, the cabinets that go with those are at the owner's house, so I won't be able to listen to them like I can these. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. More stuff to come soon.